Mickey Gall was deemed a prospect by Dana White when he quickly won his professional debut against another debuting fighter, Ron Templeton, at Dead Serious MMA 17 on November 21st, 2015. This bout was featured on Dana White's Looking for a Fight reality show, and led to Gall being one of the most inexperienced fighters on the UFC roster, with just 2 minutes 53 seconds of ring time. Gall somehow managed to also face debuting fighters in his first 2 UFC fights, which basically never happened during the Zuffa era, where fighters normally had to prove themselves worthy of working for the elite brand of combat sports. A 45-second win over Mike Jackson in Gall's UFC debut on February 16, 2016, once again with a rear naked choke, set up the match he became famous for against bad pro wrestler turned worst ever UFC fighter CM Punk. Punk managed to look completely clueless for 2 minutes 14 seconds before Gall choked him out. Gall's role continued against another Dana White creation, the then 8-1 Super Sage Northcutt, with another chokeout on December 17, 2016. These wins earned Gall the 2016 Newcomer of the Year award, but that was about the end of his luck. Ultimately, Gall, Jackson, Punk, and Northcutt proved to not be nearly as good of prospects as the UFC hoped. Jackson managed to beat Punk in another of the lowest level fights in UFC history before Punk went back to not getting along with anyone in pro wrestling. Northcutt, whose father Mark was a karate black belt who began training Sage at age 4, was one of the most famous modern era karate fighters, winning 77 youth championships and getting inducted into the Black Belt Magazine Hall of Fame at age 15. I always found him to be a fun and entertaining MMA fighter, even though he was very overhyped by UFC. He's clearly had the most success of the bunch in MMA, although his career was nearly ended when kickboxing champion Cosmo Alexandre somehow fractured Sage's face in 8 places with a brutal overhand right in Northcutt's one championship debut on May 17, 2019. Northcutt was out of action for nearly 4 years, but managed to defeat Ahmed Mujtaba in his return on May 5, 2023 to up his MMA record to 12-3. Gall's fall from grace was seemingly harder to understand, as we didn't know his back was refusing to cooperate. His issues started during his training camp for a December 7, 2019 bout against Carlos Condit, that Condit ultimately pulled out of. Gall tried to fight through it, but was in excruciating pain anytime he tried to sit down throughout the training camp for his next fight on June 27, 2020 against Platinum Mike Perry. Perry is an exciting brawler known for having arguably the lowest fight IQ in MMA, combined with not getting any useful advice from his corner, which sometimes consisted of just his girlfriend Latori Gonzalez. In the fight against Gall, Gonzalez imparted such crucial nuggets of wisdom as, "Hit him in the face." Perry praised Gonzalez's corner work after winning the fight via unanimous decision, saying, "She kept it very simple." Gall lost 2 of his next 3 fights, often laying on his stomach in constant pain for hours after training sessions, before undergoing back surgery in December 2022. Gall was unceremoniously released from UFC during this time, but was re-signed for this match against Bassil Hafez, which was his first fight since the surgery. Another East Coast fighter, Hafez was born in Pennsylvania 9 days after Gall, but it took him much longer to make the big time. He made his MMA debut in CFFC on January 1st, 2016, less than 2 months after Gall, but it took him 7 years to luck into a short-notice opportunity to face ranked contender Jack Della Maddalena on July 15, 2023. Hafez certainly overachieved here, actually winning round 1 and taking home a Fight of the Night bonus for a split decision loss. Though Gall has much more high-level MMA experience, Hafez was confident coming into his second UFC match on June 1st, 2024 at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey, due to having previously defeated Gall in a Grappler's Quest match in 2013. Hafez is a pretty intimidating dude, and he showed no fear of Gall right from the get-go. This was an exciting striking contest where Hafez applied a ton of pressure early, then became totally consumed with scoring the knockout, not worrying about standing in front of Gall and loading up. Hafez is a very good wrestler, but when he was dropping down, he was usually doing a very effective combo with a left to the body, then coming over the top with the right hand, and following with a left hook if he could. Gall was cut on the bridge of the nose from this 2 minutes in. Gall's strength has always been his grappling. His striking is a lot more of a work in progress, and early returns on that work weren't looking too promising here. Gall was stuck in a defensive mindset, spending too much time circling with his back to the octagon. It was odd that Gall only tried 2 takedowns during the fight, but Hafez succeeding in 3 of 5, combined with his grappling success against JDM, probably shows that he's the better wrestler of the two. Certainly he's the stronger man and more explosive athlete. Though Gall has improved his striking game considerably, he still had the same problem of lacking the overall athleticism to succeed more often than not in the exchanges. Gall spent round 1 trying to fight behind a jab that was too slow and too pushy, and Hafez kept beating him with the right hand counter before Gall could fully reset himself. Hafez was pressuring Gall, but most of his big power shots were actually counters to the slow jab Gall was trying to hold him off with. Meanwhile, most of Gall's success in round 1 came from his own right hand counter. The first round was clearly owned by Hafez, but Gall finally caught him with a really good body hook with 45 seconds left. Gall wasn't able to steal the round, but he gained enough confidence to turn the tide with a couple more good shots in the final seconds. It was a positive that Gall took Hafez's best shot better than Hafez took Gall's. While the early portion made this seem like it wasn't going to be much of a fight, and that stand-up brawling was going to be a big edge to the faster and more powerful Hafez, that ultimately wasn't the case. It felt like Gall got lured into a brawl, and eventually realized he could not only hang in that style, but actually had a better chance of winning in a more chaotic manner than by staying technical in a fight where his physical tools weren't as good as his opponent's. Hafez's confidence was nonetheless growing in the second round, to the point he became all too willing to just stand in the pocket throwing full power. The fans were happy they were brawling because the action was so good, but if they were a little looser and calmer, throwing their shots more directly, and in Hafez's case, without so much ill intent that it was slowing him down, either could probably have run away with the fight instead of it being so competitive. Hafez certainly bought into his own ability to knock Gall out, but Gall has a great chin, and had more stamina in the final 2 rounds because he wasn't expending so much energy trying to end the fight with a bunch of wide haymakers. Gall stunned Hafez early in the second, following the jab with a straight. Hafez kept coming hard, and landed a left hook that sent Gall into retreat. Though Hafez had this one big success, he largely scrapped the pressure game plan that was working so well in the first. Rather than feinting and attacking behind the body jab, he was much heavier on his feet, and much more predictable about when he was going to attack. After throwing too hard for most of the round, Hafez finally began to go back to fighting within himself in the latter stages, letting the counters flow rather than being so steadfast in trying to knock Gall out with one big shot. Gall had a nice double jab right hand combo before the end of round 2 though. They landed about an equal number of shots in this round, and Hafez had the best shot, but it felt like Gall was the better fighter now because he was staying within himself a lot more, taking what was available rather than forcing things. This was a very good close round where both men had some nice moments. I felt like Gall won the round when I wrote the review, but then changed to Hafez winning the round when I was getting the images for the video. Either way, the fight was trending in the direction of the more disciplined Gall because he had more left in the tank. The problem was that Gall might need the finish now, and each of his 6 finishes have been by rear naked choke, but that wasn't going to happen in a standing war. Hafez was tired in the third from winding up too much and overthrowing, but he wasn't forcing things any less because he assumed he was up 2 rounds. By this point, Hafez had completely abandoned mixing shots from low to high, and was telegraphing too many of his blows. Hafez hurt Gall with a right uppercut under the slow pushing jab 90 seconds into round 3. Gall seemed to go back into his shell, responding to being hurt by backing up and circling once again, but when Hafez got in his face, Gall shocked him with a right straight that put Hafez down. Gall was definitely going for it in the third, throwing a lot harder than in the first, without overdoing it and just getting wild and loopy like Hafez. Gall was controlling the center more, landing a lot more cleanly and powerfully. He hurt Hafez again with another right hand. There wasn't much deception on Hafez's part, and Gall finally had his timing down, but now Hafez's iron chin was carrying him the way Gall's had earlier. Though Gall was absorbing the punishment better, his face was cutting, while Hafez wasn't wearing any damage. Gall was having good success with the right hand, and was defending takedowns with guillotine attempts. Hafez finally ducked under an elbow and got a takedown to seemingly ride out the final 30 seconds. Hafez instead let Gall up for the final seconds a la Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje though, and they just winged haymakers to finish it, with Gall on the retreat. Hafez clearly won round 1 and Gall clearly won round 3. Round 2 was the tough round to score because both had their moments. Somehow, despite Gall being the hometown fighter, only one judge even gave Gall a round. This was some awful scoring, lost to miss the night of it, where Dave Torelli proved to be even worse than the usual suspects, scoring a 49-46 win for Paulo Costa in a fight where Sean Strickland won every round, and a 29-28 win for Mitch Raposo in a fight where Andre Lima won every round. Hafez vs. Gall was a very good match that was both a lot more entertaining and a lot more competitive than the actual fight of the night winner Islam Makhachev vs. Dustin Poirier. Poirier is one of my favorites, but I thought he lost all 4 rounds before submitting to a Darce choke midway through the 5th. Chris Lee actually had it 38-38, and Eric Colon gave Poirier the second, while Sal D'Amato gave Poirier the fourth, so the fight was theoretically closer than I viewed it. Nonetheless, the problem was that even though Poirier is the better stand-up fighter in theory, Islam's wrestling game was so superior that it made his striking a lot more effective, and Poirier's a lot less effective, to the point that Poirier was often outstruck when he wasn't getting dominated on the ground. Poirier, who normally at least gets submission attempts, never had even a momentarily advantage on the ground, and while he had a puncher's chance in stand-up, he couldn't be particularly aggressive because he'd get taken down again if he stayed in front of Islam for any length of time. It was a largely disappointing fight if not viewed from the perspective of Poirier being a 6-1 underdog, but I certainly hope Dustin doesn't retire.